Hey, welcome back to another episode of Miami Cyber Diaries. Today, we're spotlighting Ryan Persus. He's the CEO and founder of Superhuman Prospecting. Ryan's work is redefining cold calling and outbound sales in the modern era, and I'm excited to dig into his story. Just a quick background. I've worked with Ryan professionally. That's how I know him. That's why I invited him onto this podcast. I've seen firsthand his commitment to openness and integrity, and his business partnerships are amazing. Our collaboration was built on clear communication and mutual respect, which is why I'm excited to have him on the show today. Ryan, how's it going?
Good, man. I wish I was in that background right now.
It's
Philly
beautiful. It's
has,
like 70 degrees.
yeah,
Finally.
yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's like, it seems as though there's countries that have like rainy season and sunny season, and we have like sunny season and dark ice age season. So that's like
You're in
we're entering
Pennsylvania,
in
right?
now. Yep. Yeah. Uh, I'm wearing this vest here, down vest inside. So that's shows you a little bit. So,
I started this podcast to really spotlight entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurship was always kind of like a almost like a gated thing to me. And it was something that I thought, you had to be like an Elon Musk or just like a
mhm.
genius to run your own business and start your own business. So I like to pick people's brains about, what led them to make the jump and, what is the gap specifically. And we talked a little bit before we started about this, but talk a little bit about what inspired you to launch Superhuman Prospecting.
I would say out of anything, probably a desire to make a difference or a change. And that comes from, having some experiences, probably similar to you in an industry where you kind of see flaws or areas that could use improvement. And I remember one specific time, like I'd always had a knack for sales. Like I was going door to door doing landscaping jobs or like going to garage sales and selling things on eBay when I was 16. But my first sales job out of college, I really liked it a lot. And I remember just some of the old school, outdated, aggressive sales techniques that we were taught really rubbed me the wrong way and kind of gave me an existential crisis where I thought, hey, I love selling, but like if this is what it means, I might not want to do it. And so after some time off, I thought, well, maybe there's a way that I can kind of thread the two. How do I get like some of these short-term results, but never hurt relationships for the long term? Not forcing the hand of your customer, lying, doing whatever you can to get deals, and doing something that's more honest, but also get those results and even more. And so that's kind of where that mission really stemmed from. Um, is threading that needle and finding that new place that wasn't typically perceived when it came to selling. And so it turned into consulting, which turned into service, which is kind of where we're primarily at right now.
That's great. And you mentioned something you saw a gap in the industry and you had a gut feeling that, it was kind of ripe to be disrupted. And you said
Mhm.
something before we started, learning while you're earning. Can you kind of expand on the importance of that and how that played a role early stage in your business and kind of finding your niche?
Yeah, there's a book by, I think it's his name's Eric Rice called The Lean Startup. And there's also another one by Peter Thiel. And I can't remember what it's called, but it has to do with startups as well. And I read them around the same time. And I believe in the Eric Rice book, he talks about when you're starting up a business, there's kind of this pyramid model where at the base of the pyramid is your mission. And you got to spend a long time, or your manifesto. Like, what is the overall like purpose of what you're trying to do, regardless of the things you put on top of it, like product or pricing. And he says the mission can't, once you decide that mission, like that's not going to be able to change much in the future. But the products might change, and then on top of that, the pricing might change even more. And he said the things at the top are much more malleable than the things at the bottom. It's like roots to a tree. So that really resonated with me because once we were able to identify like what our true mission was and keep refining that same mission, then the products was like, well, we're still operating this mission if we're doing outsourced event marketing lead generation or, you know, sales copy consulting or training or cold calling outsourcing. It's all the same mission underneath, but these things could change. And that's kind of how we found that we were learning while we were earning money, doing these different services. and or projects, and then decided over time like we would just hone in and be able to scale one or two of those versus five or six. And so we were able to kind of pay ourselves while learning about how the market would respond and where we could best serve.
Yeah, that's great insight. And, I'm kind of in that phase right now of figuring it out. We talked a little bit about that, but
That's
it's
good.
so true that, critically for me, in the last really month, 2 months has been the feedback of coming in, working on a really a consultative basis. And, thinking I kind of come in there from one angle and people see some early value. And then by the end of the engagement, they kind of change your perspective and they say, hey, I didn't even know you could do this stuff. It's like, someone told me the other day, it's like you're really good at business process optimization, and I had no idea. I thought you were a cybersecurity guy. And then it's
Right.
like, well, and then, kind of sends you spiraling a bit. But,
Right.
it's perspective. And, I always say like values in the eye of the beholder, and, and perspective is as well. So it's about understanding how people perceive your value and your unique position in
Mm,
the market. So for you, I mean, that foundational mission, how has that helped Superhuman drive their, unique position in the market in today's landscape?
well, so the missions never changed, but as we learn from the market and we're honed into one or a lower number of products or services, you get more and more refined with those offerings. And so we've put all our energy into those things, right? So we do outsource cold calling with a USA based team. We do list building, and we do email follow up and kind of additional inside sales support services. But just those three things, we're not even into LinkedIn messaging or traditional marketing or SEO. We just focus on those things, which has allowed us to be better and better and better at them. And so, when you're in the market, I mean, it's always competitive. The economy is always changing. There's always things going on, and so you have to be able to understand and be aware of what's happening so that you know how to change the product to stay alive and then thrive. I think those are two different things there. We're always looking to thrive, but if you're not thriving, you're dying in some ways. It might feel like you're staying alive, but it's not sustainable if you're not thriving. And that's kind of the lesson that we learned. So you have to stay ahead. You can't stay with. You have to stay ahead. And so that's something where we've developed processes and systems and kind of leadership to initiate those things. So we're always staying ahead of the times
So
to
I think,
meet the market.
processes and systems are kind of the core, I would say, growth accelerator in any small
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great segue into kind of the next segment, which is technology and innovation. And a lot of people come to me for digital transformation, AI nowadays. And the first thing I ask them, show me your processes, because if you don't have defined what you're trying to automate, or you don't have defined what you're, how you're delivering your services, you can't begin to realize those um,
Yeah.
technological values. So
Hmm.
let's talk about technology in your business. And I remember the dashboard you gave me, the spreadsheet. You're the most KPI driven, statistically driven company from an outbound perspective I ever worked with, and that's why I immediately kind of liked you. Because everyone kind of hid behind the numbers, where you were like ruthlessly transparent and ruthlessly driven by the numbers. So, talk about how technology's transformed over the time that you've been in cold calling, and, some of the trends that you've seen.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a few uh, parts of this that are facets to this whole technology piece with what we're in. I mean, the main driver is how do we get our people on the phone and measure how they're doing on the phone. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean that's what we're trying to discover as a main priority. But there's other support tech and things that can help drive more of that or support it in a more fluid way. So I think it depends on like where we are in that spectrum. In terms of our reporting, it's funny because when you were with us, we were still using Zapier and webhooks to connect into live Google Sheets reporting.
People are still
Um,
using that.
Facts, yeah. Now, yeah, since we partnered the last time, we have finally developed a software internally. So we have a tech team now, and he's developed a software, the couple of them, to live stream through a proprietary software called Supervision, where clients can add their own team members and download reports and look at things with graphs, and it's way cooler and more official, I would say. So, but what's so interesting about what you said is that they have to have systems and procedures first before they can even think about tech, because otherwise it's just going to be wasted dollars on a subscription that they don't use. It's going to be
Absolutely.
another wasted gym subscription. So it's like you have art. Same thing with the gym. You need to be going to the gym in order for the gym subscription to be worth it. You need to be working out, and
Yep.
it's that building that muscle in a process. And so that skeleton we built in Google Sheets, literally all we did was build that in a software. Do the same exact thing. It's just now pretty in a software with more features and more fluidity. And that's a great point. So that's kind of on the reporting side, but I would say more. There's a lot of tech like outside of our company. When in cold calling in general, there's always conversations around the type of dialer someone's using. Right. So a manual, I would say the main three are manual dialer. So you have to individually click to the next call. There's auto dials or power, which is automatically goes to the next call on its own. So manual would be like 15 to 25 calls an hour. Auto would be like 50 to 100 calls an hour. And then predictive dialer is when you call 4, 5, 6 at once. The one that answers, is the one that the caller talks to, and the rest of the 4 or 5 are hung up on. And so that's big tech right now that people are talking about. There's a lot of dialers that are now integrating into tools like Apollo, where you can build your list, call and email right from where you built the list from, and it's awesome. Now, for a company like ours, it doesn't quite make sense because we're calling from multiple different people, and we have to be able to toggle between campaigns and have different scripts and things. Um, but it's something that we're considering building on our own, and we actually kind of have some of that stuff in the works. But it depends, I think, on your market and your product. If you're a one-off product company, those things can be really powerful. Now, we use a manual dialer and considering an auto dialer next year. But the thing that I don't think a lot of folks realize is a lot of the legal compliance when it comes to dialing. No one really cares, it seems, in the general market. Um, but we have to because we're under the radar of a telemarketing business. So we're a little bit more, um, you know, uh, uh, discerning about that. But it also helps us with our connection rates and things because if people are on the do not call list, we're not going to be calling them. So they're not people who wanted to be talked to anyway, right? So we're only calling people that want to. But there's also things like with auto dialers or predictive that are just mumbo jumbo about compliance. So I think it depends on which market you're in, and what's your product to help determine which one you should be using.
So I literally had a call
So
this morning, and a prospect was saying, "Oh, well, we're between Monday.com and Asana, and we want to run our agency on one of these two platforms." And what I always tell people at this point, I've been through so many demos and so many tool
yeah,
selection committees, and it's like I don't care what tool it is. I care about the functions it's providing to the business,
right,
and is it aligned with the expected outcome. So someone
right,
once told me when looking at like selecting a tool or making a technical change, you go through an exercise called build, borrow, buy, right? Because those are the three selections you really have in the market. You can build a platform like you did. You can borrow like a SaaS subscription. Buying perpetual licensing is kind of out the window now. Everyone wants monthly recurring
yeah.
revenue. So, but it's a historical kind of triangle of options to work through the pros and cons of each and kind of come to a conclusion that makes the most sense. So, obviously, you took the build route. Can you talk about why you ended up at the build selection and what that process was like?
Yeah, so it's interesting because the person that we hired to do it was, well, not even hired. I would say that we had began developing a tech team that was becoming a little bit more advanced, and we're open to learning different ways that we could connect different pieces within our entire technical landscape. And so uh, when we started to think about, man, like what are we going to do around reporting, our team wasn't at a point where they were actually able to develop it on their own. So we ended up hiring someone who reached out to us via cold email, uh, a company called iTool. They're California somewhere, and they became our consulting partner to help mentor our internal team as they needed to ideate and come up with wireframes and goals. And then they would they would be going through like startup boot or development boot camps at the same time to learn how to code this, and then they would have weekly meetings with this consulting team to check in on their progress. And so we would have strategy meetings at our leadership to like, hey, this is the end goal of what we're trying to accomplish. We've already kind of built the infrastructure on Google Sheets. So it's not like we were completely starting from scratch. We basically, hey, can we at least just replicate this? And then as we go, we can add bells and whistles that make sense. And once we started that process, it never stopped. We're fully, all of our clients are 100% on what we call, it's called supervision.
Hmm.
They get an onboarding email with that access, and they can fully experience that. And we're getting great feedback. They can even interact with it. So when we set up meetings, we have a confirmation team that calls it confirm the meeting. And then once they have the meeting, they can go in and write notes on it. So both sides can go and see. So it's almost like a CRM,
Yeah, I
but
was gonna
meant
say
for, yeah, like an outsourced uh, agency model for both sides to use interactively.
that's awesome.
So yeah, just kind of like the bells and whistles came after we were able to develop the primary functionality and begin to make it sharper from there.
So you got to the minimum viable product. We know what someone would call an
Yeah,
MVP, where it's got the core
sure.
functionality, and then you iterated, right? So, um, you mentioned you had a leadership team, and just kind of talking like business. When did you transition from just you to kind of saying, okay, I got to get people that have different perspectives and um, try to really grow this thing and start delegating?
Yeah. Well, it's a challenge. I think it's different for every business on the functions that need to be managed and led. But it's evolved quite a bit. And I would say that one of our corporate values, as a internal corporate, we call it corporate action values, is one is initiate, and another is continuously improve. And so under initiate, we have, look, every job here, all the way down to an SDR up to the C level, needs to create and initiate if they need something to get their job done. And it what it does, it incites discovery, awareness, learning, and um, proactive activity. Okay, and so we actually have this rule called kick and scream respectfully. If you don't have what you want, yeah.
That's great.
So kick and scream respectfully, because we're in a remote environment. It was never my dream to be in a remote environment, but that's where we are. And it's worked way better than I expected it to. And what that means is, like, if you're in an office, you can rub shoulders with somebody, even you might have bad body language, like bah humbug, and like someone's like, oh, what's wrong? You don't have that here. So you have to go in and seek out help. And so our team has gotten really good at seeking out that help. And if everyone's aware of that, then that's happening, then we all get our jobs done much, much better. Um, I mean, that's just kind of themes that we've evolved into. But in the early phases, like, you got to think of it kind of like an organism, like a newborn baby or something, right? Like in the womb, like all of our limbs are kind of connected still together. And then as you grow, your limbs get farther apart, and then we have fingers, and that's kind of the way it is, right? Like it is when we're small, we're doing multiple tasks, right? Like
Yep.
I'm not sure how many people are in your company. Is it just you, or you have other people
It's just me
too?
right now. Yep. I have some subcontractors,
You're,
but it's just me for the most part.
yeah, man, you're like just starting out, the zygote, right?
Incubator.
And yeah,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and so there's no limbs. It's like, but the next time maybe you're on the front end and they're on the back end, and then now you've separated those two parts, and now on the back ends you have individual operators who are doing things, and you start to see those limbs grow. And I think that uh, is the way that we thought about it. We knew that I wasn't going to be in my best position for a long time, and slowly, the more I'm able to be free from, in the, as they say, right, this very common term in entrepreneurship, which is in the business, and work more on the
Yep.
business, then the better the business is, because I can fill in those gaps and, like I said, like, tune those knobs a bit better. So
Right. So, talking about kind of your growth and, getting to where you are today,
yeah,
I started this really to break down the illusion that it's very time consuming. It's a commitment to start your own business, but also it's more accessible than ever. So for people thinking about starting a business or debating on going into entrepreneurship, what's one piece of advice you would give them starting a business today?
Yeah, I think it would be different 2 years ago than even it would be now because, I was always raised on the assumption that you needed to find something unique, rare, innovative to the market in order for it to make sense for you to go into business. And while I do think that's true, I also think that red oceans or crowded spaces can actually be really good too because, well, at the end of the day, that product seems to be very needed. That's why there's a lot of people doing it. And I actually read that in a book called The Sweaty Startup, and so that was a really profound book because it got into things like, hey, like this guy, um, oh gosh, what's his name, Nick something, but he had gotten into it just doing like college summer storage and ended up building a storage facilities strategically and just doing it better than his competitors, and now is like $50 million net worth or something. And I think like he's like, yeah, like it was just doing something that someone had already done just better, you
Yeah.
know and I think that's kind of what Superhuman has done because cold calling's been around since since markets in ancient Greece. But like at the same time, hasn't been done in a way that we can see it in a new and innovative that would catch the attention of people. You
I
know?
would totally agree with
S-
that. I mean, when we met each other finally, I think I found you on Google. Just like
Yeah.
crawling every keyword string I could find because I was so frustrated, and we kind of had made a conscious decision amongst our leadership team to outsource the calling function. And we knew kind of the levels we needed to be at in terms of volume, and just to find someone that could a meet the call volume that they promised alone, which is like you would think
Right.
is like the low bar,
Yeah.
let alone
Yeah.
be transparent and talk about connection rates and all the different metrics that go into tracking and improving your cold call outcomes. Um, it was really remarkable. So obviously, you're still a strong believer that cold calling can work.
Yeah.
Um, there's more noise in the outbound sales space than ever with AI agents, with automation, with all these different systems. So where do you see cold outbound headed, and what's working today?
Cold outbound, I think, will continue to exist. I don't think that's really going away. I think the only way that happens is if a channel is completely shut off. Like no one's allowed to make phone calls anymore, right? Or they just don't exist anymore. And you know, or like email, it's going to be hard to shut off email because it's like people are going to be emailing for in rest of time.
Right.
So like it's going to be difficult. I just think it's going to be change. It can change. So for instance, we've seen a slight deduction in the connection rates to decision makers, but gatekeeper connection rates are still high, meaning like on average, we're seeing about a 20% human connection rate in B2B amongst all of our campaigns. I mean, that's like one every five. We're still getting a human on the phone. And there's a misnomer. If you don't have the data, it's hard to see. There's a misnomer that a lot of um, the iOS 26 changes where you can screen
The
calls
spam, yeah,
without it even
screening.
ringing. That's a huge hit to cold calling. It's actually not because we did a study right before iOS 26 came out, like July to August, somewhere around there. We studied all the leads that we got, and we make about 3,500 calls a day, 60 to 75,000 calls a month, manually. And out of the leads we got, right? So let's call it like 1,000, 1,500 or something like that from that month. 75% of all the leads, this is really good info. 75% of the leads were set with office numbers, either corporate or direct.
Mm,
Only 25% of leads were set with mobile, and out of those 25, half were Apple. So you're looking like 13%, somewhere like between 13 and 15% were even set from Apple. So, and and now we're going into this phase of like that was such a big deal, like cold calling's over, all this stuff. Well, it's probably going to be more over for like predictive dialers, right? Who are
Right.
calling mobile numbers. But like I said, like maybe for B2C, but in B2B, we're not really seeing much change, and you have to actually opt into that thing. And all that means anyway is just you have a subject line for your email. So if you're calling manual or auto, just leave a good subject line,
Yeah.
you know? I'll just say one more thing about that, which is even though connection rates have been down a little bit, we actually see a higher, and maybe it's because our callers are better now and they're following our methodology and we're getting better at it. I'm not really sure all the reasons, but we're actually seeing a higher uh, appointment setting rate on the conversations we do get. So in fact, our overall appointment setting rate, calls to appointments, are actually the same, if not a little bit higher than they were a few years ago. So it's almost like people are they're actually craving a little bit of a human connection because there's so much digitalization and mistrust because of robots and stuff. So like you can just actually talk to a human. It's kind of refreshing.
Well, I
Who would have
can
thought?
tell you every time I get a cold call and I pick it up and there's like dead air and then I hear like a beep, I know it's like a parallel dialer and it's like waiting to connect me
Yeah,
to the person and I hang up before I even talk to the person.
100%.
So like that
Yeah,
like 3 seconds of dead air, at least for me personally, and I assume other people are doing the same thing I'm doing, is critical in, whether
yeah,
I think, it's a valid call or it's just I just assume it's spam, right? So
yeah,
lots of stuff to track and lots of metrics, which I know you track religiously.
yeah.
So, we've talked about kind of the tech behind what runs a business, building your own software, some of the go to market strategies in cold calling that are working. I want to hop into the lightning round. So, we're going to run through a
Yeah.
couple questions really quick, and you give me quick answers, and I give you quick questions, and then we'll move on to the closing thoughts. Sound good?
Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, here we go. So it's the lightning round with Ryan Persus, CEO of Superhuman Prospecting. Ryan, best single piece of advice for sales teams in 2025?
Product relevance and messaging over targeting.
Perfect. One word to describe your approach to prospecting.
Assertive.
Agreed. Dream collaboration.
Uh, Mr. Beast.
If you weren't doing this, what would you be doing?
uh, Probably golfing or playing, trying to build lower league soccer.
Nice. All right. Most exciting sales technology or trend going into 2026?
I would say clay. It's pretty fascinating.
Plays incredible. All right, thanks, Ryan, so much for taking some time. I know you're busy. I mean, you run a freaking door to door mosquito business. I saw you posting on LinkedIn. You were door to door knocking the other day. You're a freak. You love that
It,
stuff, and
it's
then you
crazy.
were doing Christmas lights, like putting up Christmas lights. You're
Yeah.
nonstop. It's amazing, man. So I really appreciate the time. Obviously, we stay in pretty constant communication, always have, and I can vouch for your services and no one else I'm going to think of when I'm ready to kind of ramp up and do my outreach. So,
Got it.
where can people find you online? How can they connect with human prospecting? What are good resources for people to learn more about your business?
That's great. Superhumanprospecting.com. We are constantly adding resources for the market on there, from blogs to one pagers, insights, call recordings. Our YouTube page is great. We have we have close to 200 call recordings from our team from the last year and a half up there now. And you can go to see what one sounds like for your own education, or if you want to hear what our team like, if you're interested in using us. The H2Hmethod.com is dedicated to cold call messaging, cold call education, and we actually have an AI script writing tool that I've partnered with a company called Swayed on. So it's the H2H method built in with AI script writing capacity. So it uses our method to make a custom script for your business, and then LinkedIn.
All right. Awesome, Ryan. Again, CEO of Superhuman Prospecting. I'm Matt Mulcahy, CEO of Miami Cyber. And thanks for tuning in this week. Looking forward to the next one. And Ryan, thanks again so much for your time and insight.
You're welcome.
Thanks.